In this video, you'll learn how to enter and approve employee miscellaneous expense transactions. When your employees incur costs related to a project that are not captured on the employee time card, you can use miscellaneous expenses. Examples of these costs are fuel for a vehicle, reimbursable meals and travel, purchase of incidental materials with a company credit card, and so on. When an employee purchases materials for the project that are not tied to a purchase order, you'll need to decide whether an expense is best entered as an employee miscellaneous expense or as a vendor bill. If the employee pays using a company credit or debit card, this is typically entered as a miscellaneous expense. These charges can also be entered as a vendor bill not tied to a purchase order, but using miscellaneous expenses is easier. If the employee pays cash for the materials, and the materials are for different job cost codes, they should also be entered as a vendor bill. If the employee pays cash and the materials all pertain to the same cost code, the lump sum amount can be entered either as a miscellaneous expense or a vendor bill. In general, if a vendor has an established account with you, offering payment terms or discounts for early payments, any charges payable to that vendor should be entered as a vendor bill, regardless of whether or not they are tied to a purchase order. Charges payable to vendors with whom you do not have established terms can be entered as miscellaneous expenses. Before you can enter miscellaneous expenses, you'll need to have a couple of different areas prepared. The employee referenced on the miscellaneous expense must be active, and the track time and expenses option must be selected. In the HR module, open the active employees list and click an employee to open their profile. Under Basic Information, check that the track time and expenses option is selected. The project should be set up, and the prime contract must be approved with a status date. You'll also need to have added the project cost codes that will apply to the miscellaneous expenses. Set up any taxes that will apply to employee expenses. In Feature Settings, Time and Expenses, you'll need to set up miscellaneous expense types and miscellaneous expense payment types. Miscellaneous expense types let you specify categories for the type of expense incurred, such as food, fuel, hotels, and so on. Miscellaneous expense payment types let you specify the method of payment used for the expense. This is important if you set up integration with an accounting package, because each payment type can be mapped to a different general ledger account. You'll also want a payment type such as employee reimbursement, for when the employee pays out of pocket for the expense. Work with your accounting team to understand the different payment accounts you'll need to set up. You'll see how these lists work when we enter a miscellaneous expense. When you assign a credit card payment type to a miscellaneous expense, you can select the vendor, or the credit card issuer, to whom the payment is owed. To do that, the credit card must have been set up in Contact Management and added to the project directory. As with labor time cards, you can add miscellaneous expenses manually from the project by going to Project Home, Time and Expenses. Employees can also enter their miscellaneous expenses from the Sage Construction Management mobile app. To import miscellaneous expenses from a spreadsheet, you'll need to go through the HR module, and we'll look at that in a moment. Let's start by adding expenses from the project. Next to Miscellaneous Expenses, click the Actions button and select Add Miscellaneous Expenses. Since we started from the project page, the project is already selected. If there's only one approved prime contract on the project, that's also selected, but if not, you'll need to select one. We'll select Prime Contract Number 2, which is a cost plus without GMP prime contract. You can also select a prime change order and a work order if applicable. For the expense contact, select the employee who incurred the expense. The payment type list comes from settings, as you saw earlier. For this example, we'll select employee reimbursement as the payment type. The payee should be the employee, since a corporate card was not used. If we did select vendor as the payee, we'd have another field to select the vendor, and this list comes from the companies in the project directory. In the expenses area, fill in the individual transactions. The date is required, and the expense type options come from that miscellaneous expense type list in settings. You'll need to select a cost code for each line. Under Resource, Other is selected by default, but you can change the selection. The prime contract we'll apply this expense to as a cost plus without GMP contract, so we'll need to make sure the billable status is correct. If we leave billable selected, the expense is available for importing into prime invoices. If we change it to unbillable or on hold, the expense cannot be imported into an invoice, nor can unapproved billable expenses. For fixed lump sum and unit price contracts, the billable option is not used in further processing. Click Add and Close, and you'll see the new entry in the miscellaneous expenses list. Now let's look at how to import miscellaneous expenses from a spreadsheet. To find the spreadsheet template, go to Help and click Getting Started. Click the Import options from Microsoft Excel topic and scroll down to Time and Miscellaneous Expenses. Click Miscellaneous Expenses. The topic provides the instructions, a link to the import template, and a table showing the fields. You can't import miscellaneous expenses from the project. You'll need to do it from the HR module. Next to Miscellaneous Expenses, click the Actions button and select Import Miscellaneous Expenses from Excel. Click Choose File and select the file to import. When you've finished adding miscellaneous expenses, click the Actions button again and select Approve Miscellaneous Expenses. Select the checkboxes for all transactions to approve, and then click Choose Bulk Action. You have several options in this window. You can lock or unlock transactions, copy them to a new date, or delete them. We'll select Approve Miscellaneous Expenses, and then click Choose Bulk Actions. The expenses are now available to be imported into Cost Plus Prime invoices. For Cost Plus Prime invoices, these costs are available as supporting documentation. For Fixed Lump Sum and Unit Price Prime invoices, these costs are classified by job cost code and can be seen in Financial Analytics with several levels of detail. In this video, you learned how to enter and approve employee miscellaneous expense transactions.